Kingdom 11E. What does it mean for the church? This is a continuation from Kingdom 11D, where I ended it with this question: how did the church become what it is today? I believe there are several reasons for this, but I think the main reason is very obvious. It's because of this wrong understanding of the good news as the good news of salvation to go to heaven instead of the good news of the kingdom of God, isn't it? Because of that, churches also have a wrong understanding of spirituality. So millions of churches around the world have very little concern for what's happening outside of the four walls of their church buildings. Now, I've already shared with you that when Jesus came, he kept talking about his kingdom, not about church. But what do churches talk about today? They don't talk about the kingdom. Instead, they keep talking about church, 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 and church. Isn't it? Isn't it because they keep talking about the church and they are so focused on church that there are so many attempts to redefine what church is? Yeah? And isn't that also why there are so many denominations? Because each new denomination that comes about is yet another attempt to redefine what church is, isn't it? Otherwise, there's no need for yet another denomination, right? Do you know how many denominations there are in the world today? There are more than 45,000 denominations of the church in the world today. Imagine if an unbeliever were to hear that. What would he think? Why would he want to join us if we are divided more than 45,000 ways? So why is it we keep focusing on church and not on the kingdom? How is it that the kingdom is the heart and the core of Jesus' teaching, but we have missed it? How is it that we know Jesus called the good news of the kingdom of God, and yet we didn't realize it is about the kingdom of God? Strange, isn't it? When I reflected back on how I first became a believer, I realized how I had become blind to the kingdom. You see, when my friend first shared the gospel with me, he did not mention anything about the kingdom, even though it's called the gospel or the good news of the kingdom of God. Then I joined a church. And the church also never told me anything about the kingdom. The church told me about church, of course. Yeah. So what I received from the very beginning was a pair of salvation, heaven, gospel spectacles. And a pair of church spectacles. Yeah. So like everyone else in church, I looked at everything through those invisible spectacles. And after God opened my eyes and I realized why the church cannot see the kingdom, because it is so focused on itself. When Christians cannot see the kingdom, then they will think of the church as an institution and focus on church growth and internal politics. Yeah, instead of being salt and light in this world. Unless these church spectacles are removed from us, we will just keep focusing on church. Our whole lives will just revolve around church, 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 and church. When I realized that, I've shared this with you before, I prayed, Lord, I'm going to start to read your word all over again. Please, if it's possible, remove all these invisible spectacles from me, because I want to see things, Lord, as you see them. Now, where did churches get their understanding and meaning of church from? They didn't get it from the Bible. We already went through that, yeah? So where did they get it from? They got it from the West, who inherited it from Constantine, the emperor of the Roman Empire. Constantine changed church from communities into a religious institution. And this concept of church as a religious institution went from Europe to America and around the whole world. Now, we who are not from the West have unfortunately and unwittingly inherited this part of the history of the West. It's not our history, but we've become stuck with it. Why don't we go back to the Bible and look at the early church and get our understanding and meaning of church from the Bible? You know, whenever I've asked this question in churches, I can't understand it. They will shake their heads. They will say no. I really can't understand it. Okay, anyway, for those who are interested, who are hungry, when we study the Bible, we will find that the meaning and purpose of church comes from the kingdom of God. Why? Because, as you have heard me share in Kingdom 11b, the kahal or the ecclesia is the community of God's kingdom. So if the ecclesia is the community of God's kingdom, then surely it is the kingdom of God that gives it its meaning and purpose, right? And therefore the church exists only to serve the kingdom. Or the church exists only because of the kingdom, right? Paul gave us a picture of how the church is related to the kingdom when he told us that we are the ambassadors of Christ. 2 Corinthians 5:20. Now think of an ambassador and his staff and the nation that they represent. If for any reason the nation ceases to exist, the ambassador and his staff have to close shop, right? And you know, this actually happened in 1990 when the Berlin Wall came down. That night itself, when East Germany ceased to exist, after it was reunited with West Germany, the embassies of East Germany, that was all over Europe and Russia, they all closed down immediately. The ambassadors and their staff, that night itself, they switched off the lights and went home. They all lost their jobs. Yep. In other words, we, the church, must therefore exist and function only to represent the kingdom of God. We cannot fashion church to be anything we like. If we do, we would have created an idol in our own image or likeness, or in the image and likeness of the senior pastor, not in the image and likeness of God. Yeah. So many churches today are not even aware of the kingdom, or who think that they are the kingdom. I mean, imagine an ambassador and his embassy, his staff, who have forgotten about the nation that they represent and they think they are the nation. Let me end by repeating something I said just now. Apart from the kingdom, the church has no meaning or purpose. The church exists only to serve the kingdom. In that case, what if a church is not serving the kingdom? Then it's not the church of Jesus Christ.